Hello, and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. I'm Jack Wilson, Queen Anne's County Commissioner, representing District 1. This podcast is your connection to Maryland policy and politics, covering the issues that shape our communities and the decisions that impact everyday lives. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. Kevin Kinnally back here with Michael Sanderson and Dom Butchko. Michael and Dom, how are you? We're doing a special episode today, one that we like, news or noise. We've done it a few times. We're going to keep it rolling today.
Yeah, happy to be back.
All right, so as I said, we're going to do news and noise, and we're going to do a roundup of some new items from the last few weeks and see if we can sort it into the news, which is real things that are important category, versus the noise, stuff in the news, but we think there's less fire than there is smoke. So let's start with you, Dom. I mean, what do you think about being on for news or noise?
I'm excited. This is the first time I'm doing this format, and it's very cool. It's very new.
All right, well, I'll just get right into it. We'll start with the topic that's getting a lot of attention in the news. It's one that we've talked about here on the podcast as well. Data centers. It seems like the chatter about them always continues and continues and continues. There's always something new every day. We're on social media a lot, and if you follow anybody in politics virtually at any level, it's just always on fire. So maybe I'll frame this in a different way. Let's start with this question. Data centers actually deserve the bad reputation that they're picking up? Do we think that is news or noise? And I'll start with you, Dom.
Yeah, so data centers, really big subject. I would be remiss, by the way, if I did not throw in a little zinger for our mini-series, The Briefing Room, which actually covers data centers. And the big thing when you're talking about this subject is, what do they do and how much are we actually using them? I mean, data centers, they support our GPS tracking, they support AI tools. We all know how much I love ChatGPT, cloud storage. And so really, when you think of data centers from a community perspective, it's a demand side issue. Are you using the things that the data centers are providing? Companies aren't just putting up data centers for no reason. So to me, I want to say it's more noise than news, because everybody is using all of these new tools and toys that the data centers are providing.
Yeah, and the idea that if a data center comes to your neighborhood, your electric rates automatically go up, but if they go like 50 miles down the road, there won't be any effect. I think that's definitely noise and not news. Electric rates are not set neighborhood by neighborhood. It's more like each service region. So it's across multiple states. There are various regional entities involved. So I think that's definitely noise and not news.
Yeah, but this is really grabbing people's attention, right? I mean, if you're anywhere in politics and policy, sort of the energy crunch, but specifically data centers are just on everybody's mind. Over the course of the year, MACo tries to get out and join with the governing body of each of our member counties, and just got back earlier this week from meeting with the Frederick County Council. And as we know, Frederick County is sort of the first Maryland jurisdiction to try and get into this pool, and they're trying to set up a data center campus. We've had them at our conferences to huge packed rooms talking about the ins and outs of trying to make that happen as a matter of land use and economic development and planning and all that sort of stuff. But even at our meeting in Prince George's County with their council, there was a lot of discussion about, we gotta make them bring their own power supply. And there's sort of the room full of, we gotta do that. That sounds, it sounds good to everybody in the room. I don't know. This is getting kind of above my pay grade as far as understanding the ins and outs of this market. But I don't know if that idea is viable. Is anyone coming if you do that? I don't know. If Maryland's approach, I mean, that's part of what we want to get to here. But if Maryland's approach on data centers ends up being, well, we're going to set a really high bar. They got to be clean and they got to be responsible and they got to do all these different things and bring their own power supply. We could just miss this wave of these facilities. If Marylanders are still going to want all those services that you mentioned, Dom, right? This is a demand side thing. So I want my GPS system to work, and I want ChatGPT or whatever to help me sort through projects and put information together and stuff. And we're all going to want that stuff. but we may just get those services imported from Pennsylvania or West Virginia or whoever else is doing this stuff.
I don't think that's a MACo position, but it definitely does feel like that's what's at stake here a bit. And of course, data centers come with a lot of tax revenue. Of course, we know the problems that they bring as well. So I agree with you. They're going to go somewhere. And I think that's kind of the angle from the industry right now is that, hey, if you don't want to talk about this and if you don't want to give us what we want, we'll just go to the next state over. And we see that a lot in all these sectors, but it seems like with data centers, that's kind of front and center. Let's make this a part 2 then. The general election in 2026, this one that's coming in November, will see data centers and what we're going to do about them as a major issue for people running for Congress, the state legislature, county executive, county commissioner, all the way down to the municipal level. Do we think that's going to be a big issue in the upcoming election?
Oh, 100%. Big news. Big news.
Yeah, easy call there. News, not noise. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's very safe and it's on everyone's minds. All right, let's bring it closer to home. Let's change subjects a bit. Last week, 2 immigration-related bills passed by the General Assembly were on a list that the governor had announced he would not sign. So is this turn of events news or noise? And Dom, we'll start with you again.
So I love these little quirks of how government works and the intricacies and the little, knobs and everything. So under the Maryland Constitution, we have a special procedure that I have not heard of in other states. It could exist, but not to my knowledge. I don't know if it's common. But if the governor doesn't sign the bill, but he also doesn't veto the bill, then the bill takes effect anyway. So for our Schoolhouse Rock nerds, there's no pocket veto in the great state of Maryland. So what's happening here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's in our Constitution that way. So, I mean, that's the procedure. If the governor just doesn't sign a bill, doesn't veto the bill becomes law without the governor's signature.
That is just pure noise to me.
I think there's an argument that it's pure noise. I mean, I guess if you want to make an argument, there's something to this. Maybe you go to say, well, why is this process in the Constitution? It seems pointless. Why would you even allow this path? And I guess the argument would be that this is a structural way for the governor to communicate, hey, these bills aren't really what I would have wanted. And, like in this year's case with these immigration bills, I mean, there were a couple immigration-related bills that they sort of moved through the legislative process really rapidly, had a special signing back in, I don't know, probably early February, it feels like. There was, sometime around Groundhog Day, they're signing bills. So, do a big public, we're going to respond to what we've seen from ICE in other places and so forth, right? But on these bills, the governor's response is sort of a shrug, and you sort of send the message that I at least weighed the idea of vetoing and not letting the bills advance. So maybe that's the best case I can make that there's actual news here, is that this is a communication from the executive to the General Assembly saying, you're up against a line here. I saw one reporter or one headline described it as drawing a line. I don't know if this is drawing a line, but maybe sort of observing where the line is relatively close. But he didn't veto the bills. Now that would have been real news.
All right, especially because the General Assembly would not be able to override a veto without coming into town for a special session. So I agree, Michael.
All right. Speaking of special sessions, that's a great segue.
I hate to mention it. It feels like they just left, but this has to be up as our next question. There's talk again about redistricting. There was a lot of talk, of course, during the legislative session. They decided not to try and do it. It sounds like maybe the idea of doing so, though, now through a constitutional amendment is back, quote, on the table. And anytime people start talking about changing district maps, everybody suddenly becomes an expert on constitutional law and election rules. So let's join the party. Let's do it. This is happening this summer. News or noise?
So I think we need to break down what's actually happening. So taking a step back, Virginia, their legislature was meeting at the same time as ours. They passed a map. We did not. But Virginia's map was recently struck down by their courts. It was unconstitutional. And so because of that, the conversation is bubbling up again. Can Maryland do something? What should Maryland do? And so to be clear, I think the plan is to put something out to voters this election. So the voters in Maryland would have to pass the new constitutional amendment this election, and that would clear the path for maps next election. So the maps in 2026 won't change, but we're going to lay the groundwork and the tracks for changing the maps for 2028. I mean, that sounds kind of clever to me. We're inching at the issue, but we're not doing it for this upcoming midterm. They'll be changed for the presidential. To me, that's news.
I think this has gotten a little bit tricky to follow. I think, to be honest, I think a lot of observers sort of misunderstood the hesitance of the Maryland Senate on this back when they were having this active debate in January, February earlier this year during the ordinary 90-day session, where the window was kind of open to maybe redraw maps for the 26 election.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's possible that if the hesitance of the Senate kind of boiled down to this is a politically risky thing to do and it could backfire. We could have the Maryland courts look at the Maryland Constitution and tell us, not only are we not going to take your new maps, but we're going to redraw maps and you're not going to like that outcome. That's a little different than I just don't like the new map, right? So I think, if the variation now is to basically let the voters decide, that could pick up some legislators who were unwilling to advance it and be worried about the Constitution, like to try and do it during the 26 session. So I guess I land in a similar place, Dom. I don't think we can rule it out. I think I'm with you. I think it's news. It might actually happen.
And let's go 3 for 3, because I definitely believe it's news. I think it's a completely separate debate from the one that took place during session, right? You're not talking about drawing maps for the November election, which we there just wasn't enough time to sort all that out, in my opinion, in the State Board of Elections' opinion. If you're talking about doing it down the road and asking the voters to approve the legislature doing that, I think it's a completely separate conversation. And we've seen this before, right? A tricky issue that has trouble getting, a simple majority converts into a ballot question. And in Maryland, that normally means a constitutional amendment. And then you have enough votes to pass it with the 3/5 vote needed to amend the Constitution. The math there seems counterintuitive, but maybe that's where we are on this. And I think, asking the voters to give them permission to do it, I think could change a lot of the minds in the Senate. And again, I do think it's a completely separate debate. We're not talking about doing this for the 26 cycle. We're talking about doing it for the presidential and down the line. So I definitely agree that it's noise.
One of the things that kind of I'm scratching my head at, definitely new. I think we're 3 for 3 news. Well, but one of the things that I'm scratching my head, so why call a special session that would, invite criticism, and you'll see the headline about this is going to cost X amount of dollars per day to bring them in to make this change. I was reading an article, I think it was Maryland Matters, I'm pretty sure, but they were talking about this particular issue. And the idea of just changing the Constitution was in the legislative conversation when they were here in session a few months ago. So why not just do it then? Why do it now in June or July? That one just has me scratching my head.
And I mean, we've sort of seen this show before. I mean, relative to other states, Maryland, we run a relatively tight ship. Most years we have our 90-day session, and that's that. And occasionally there's a particular topic that requires a special session or some sort of immediate action, but it's pretty uncommon here. Not like other states that do this sort of at a drop of the hat. But when you call people to town, when you call the delegates and senators back to town for a special session, especially if it's longer than a day or two, you start getting into, like, you can run a tape of the expenses. How much does it cost to print a new copy of the bill and bring back all the security staff and pay for everybody's travel and expenses and all that kind of stuff. So even if the total cost of the whole enterprise is whatever, a couple $100,000, that has no meaningful bearing on a $3 trillion budget or a $3 billion problem that we have for the year coming up. But still, that is a bad headline. I agree. I don't know. Maybe that waters down my thinking about news there. But I guess it's back on the table. So yeah, it's a real thing.
Seems to be on the table for sure. So let's move on a bit. We try to do something lighthearted on these news or noise episodes. So I'll try one here. Have either of you been following these quote unquote enhanced games? Anyone paying attention to this, Michael or Dom?
Is this the one where we're taking, 20-year-old athletes and giving them steroids and medication?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess, the idea was that you juice a bunch of people up. Well, they choose to juice themselves up with whatever steroids, drugs, whatever performance enhancing substances they'll need to go and shatter all these world records. But it's not off to a great start. It doesn't seem to be working. I saw one swimmer that won an event when he was completely clean and legal. So that feels like that defeated the purpose. If the headline's supposed to be look what happens when we take the limits off, and then a guy shows up and wins the thing the normal way, that's not a great start. So it almost makes you wonder why people actually, whether people actually wanted a new sports league or whether this thing was just created to cause people to argue about another thing on social media or at the Thanksgiving dinner table. So I mean, what do we think here?
I like that hypothesis that it's just, Thanksgiving dinner fodder.
Yeah.
I actually could be down for that. I mean, no surprise that I've thought about this a lot, and
Yeah.
I think my take is, I think that the problem is like who are the people who are going to say, all right, I'm all in. I've heard that there's some millionaires putting up big money for prizes, and so I'm going to go do a 7-month steroid or enhancing substance regimen so I can go win the big prize here. I mean, if you're, I don't know, if you're a swimmer or whatever, and you're an Olympic level swimmer who would be competing at the highest level, and you're 19 or 21 or 23, and you're like right at your peak, are you going to do that? Are you going to like potentially risk your whole career saying, well, the steroid thing is where it's at. I'm gonna go win the $500,000 prize, break a world record with the crazy drugs. I mean, I think that like this is probably going to attract a different kind of athlete.
Yeah.
It's my best guess, right? That you're getting like the 29-year-old, not the 21-year-old. And this is the guy who had his window, and he's got a bronze medal from 2 Olympics ago, and he's like, well, maybe if I get super juiced and super jacked, like maybe I can go win this thing. But I don't think we're getting the best athletes plus all the juice, which might be the only way you'd see like all these world records drop and that kind of stuff. I don't think they're not sending their best here.
Yeah, I have mixed. I mean, look, I think I've said on the record before that, when I was a kid, McGuire versus Sosa, that home run race, it was a fantastic summer. I know that like that's nostalgia. We didn't have social media. It was just a different thing. But those, they were obviously enhancing and they were smashing home runs. People like home runs. People like to see the long ball. So I think there have been times where I'm like, you know what? If that's what somebody chooses to do and everyone knows about it, let them do it. But here, I feel like this is one step away from Hunger Games. I mean, Michael, you mentioned billionaires funding this whole venture, and
Yeah,
it
but the
feels
worst
like,
Hunger Games, because they're not even stronger.
right,
Like they're not
right.
even doing this stuff.
It feels like that we're just one step away from like, okay, we're going to condition people that this is okay, and then when we actually like let people go and try to kill one another, and these billionaires are just sitting in their throne watching, it's going to be fine. I don't know. I did see some pictures of some of these athletes, and they look super jacked. So I mean, Michael, maybe they're 29, but they look jacked.
This just sounds like the opening to the biggest dud in Marvel history. Like
Yeah.
he got bit by a spider and nothing happened. I say this is noise.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean,
I'm with you on
yeah,
the noise. I mean, it again, when somebody who's clean and does everything the legal way wins, that's pretty much a flop. So let's say round one did not work out. I don't know how much money and prizes it would take to reach the end goal, but I mean, I don't think they're there yet.
right. I mean, if the question is the enhanced games going to evolve to be like the next X Games, right? Like not to rival the Olympics, but a relatively
You're
big
right.
event that a lot of athletes build their annual cycle around. I think sign me up for noise there too. Yeah, that's noise.
All right, so let's get back to something maybe our listeners care a little bit more about. So it looks like the Florida legislature is going into a special session just to talk about one of our favorite topics, property taxes. They are one of several states that are talking about how they might get rid of the property tax entirely. This is something, again, mostly in conservative states. It's a great talking point for anyone running for election. Just eliminate property taxes. So this trend is going to catch on and show up in Maryland before too long. Is that news or noise? And Dom, because this is your first news and noise, we'll continue to go to you first here.
Yeah, so this is the part where it comes out that I'm really a personality hire because you guys are the tax people, not me. But my understanding isn't Florida its own thing? Don't they have so much tourist revenue that they don't need property taxes? I mean, I don't know. I like to think that this is probably noise, but again, you guys are the numbers folks, not me.
Right. Well, I mean, to me, the real question is if you wipe out the property tax, how do you pay for schools and public services? Obviously, and that is me with the county hat on. But the money, of course, has to come from somewhere. But I guess there are some states where the voters don't support a lot of services, and I guess maybe this sort of thing could get popular there. But again, I still feel like even if you say we're going to eliminate the property tax and everybody shows up and says, yes, great, with, and then they're so excited, they're going to get hit somewhere else because, again, you got to pay for things like schools and fire departments and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have maybe a slightly different angle on it. I think I lead toward noise too, but like look at where we've been recently in Maryland with our fiscal circumstance, where we've got sort of a shaky foundation for our whole fiscal infrastructure. I mean, we've had the last few years recent budget solutions when the state has a shortfall here or there, and a pretty big part of what Annapolis has been doing to resolve their own sort of the state fiscal problem is shifting costs onto counties, onto local governments, where, where are the counties supposed to come up with? I mean, I think at last tally, it's in the neighborhood of like $200 million a year worth of state services for teacher pensions and for other services and stuff like that. They're just sending us invoices. We got to pay it out of the county budget, but I mean, that's just coming out of property taxes, right? So, like, like they're not flipping the lever and changing the rate for the property tax in your county or the next county over. But when they say, oh, your county needs to come up with $11 million to pick up your share of these state costs, it's just, well, how are we still supposed to fund the schools and the parks and the roads and the things that everybody needs day to day? And it's like, well, the only place to go to get that kind of money is going to be the property tax. You can't hate the property tax and dump on it the same way.
Michael, I don't think you're supposed to say that out loud, especially
probably not.
I think you're supposed to be whispering that, when the General Assembly shifts costs, that typically means property tax increases without the General Assembly actually doing that. It falls to the local. So, like you said, where are you supposed to pick up an extra 200 million when you're reliant on the property tax? And virtually every county, or at least most of the counties now are at or near the top of the income tax rate. So I agree with you. And philosophically, if you're against property taxes, you would certainly be reluctant to saddle counties with a lot of new mandates and cost shifts because, again, that's the only place to go for counties in Maryland. So again, Michael, I think you should watch your back walking around Annapolis, but you just spit some knowledge here on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, even if you are worried about housing affordability and you see taxes as a part of that equation, during our big legislative initiative on housing, we had a whole segment that was shifting costs from affordable units onto units that could have a higher burden, and that idea just died. So I don't think this is going to catch on in Maryland. It seems like noise to me.
Yep, by noise.
Same here, noise there, especially here in Maryland. All right, so one more thing. We wrote on the Conduit Street blog about Standard & Poor's kept Maryland's credit rating at AAA, but it put Maryland on a negative outlook, sort of a warning list. Last year, we lost our AAA rating when Moody's downgraded Maryland. So is this new action from Standard & Poor's news or just more noise? And Michael, for this one, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think the proper framing is this really isn't news. This is just the same story as before. And we spent some time talking about this at the end of last year when it first happened. Maybe it was after the state had gone to its first bond sale since the downgrade, since we went from being AAA. And I think basically everybody's doing the same kind of analysis. These different companies, Fitch and Standard & Poor's and Moody's, they all do the same kind of work. They're looking at the tax base that you have and your trends in spending and your pattern of taking up and funding your responsibilities. I mean, nominally, your bond rating is about how likely is it that the state of Maryland or whomever is going to make good and pay the debt service on their bonds, that if you bought their bond, you're going to get paid rather than being left holding the bag. And first of all, generally speaking, governments are a pretty good risk. Even when you're several clicks below AAA, you're still relatively creditworthy and don't have to pay super high interest rates like somebody who's got a bankruptcy problem. But I think that one other agency is seeing the same kind of things that Moody's did when they clicked us down one click. I don't think that's really a new story. I'm reluctant to call it noise, but it's sort of like this is just the play out of the story that we've already kind of registered, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're all really bracing for a tough budget cycle next year. I think everyone was holding their breath on this past session. Are they going to be able to plug all the holes? Thankfully, they were able to, but we know that a lot of that's just kicking the can down the road. Words out, 2027 is going to be a lot of belt tightening.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think if you put all of this together, if you look at the budget situation here in Maryland and the gaps, I think the whole picture together is probably news. But the fact that one of the other big rating agencies are on the same page isn't really a news story. It's just the same story percolating again. So I think that sounds about right, that this one is noise. Okay, so the month of May delivered a few interesting stories. I guess we've done our run through again to separate out the real stuff. Data centers, going to be a hot topic, I think, for a long time, not just now, but for a while. Wiping out the property tax here in Maryland, not so much. And then the steroid Olympics, we're not feeling it just yet. Maybe round two will change some opinions. But I think that's kind of where we are right now. We haven't gotten into any world politics, but our little bubble here, that's what we're talking about today.
Oh, there's a lot going on. And Kevin, before we jump, I want to take another second to give a shout out to our limited series we're doing on the podcast. If you haven't listened to it, it's called The Briefing Room. We have 5 episodes on energy. I think episode 3 came out this week. Yep. After that, we're going to be covering housing finance. So if you like these conversations that really go in the weeds, you like getting a little nerdy, you have questions, check out The Briefing Room.
Coming your way on Tuesday. I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, I have to give a plug to our summer conference coming in August. You've seen it on our socials, on our website, on the blog. Make sure you're registered. It's going to be fantastic. All the stuff we covered here today. I don't know, Dom, are you doing a session on the steroid Olympics? I can't remember if you have that in your repertoire.
Oh, I have 2. I have 2 sessions coming up on the steroid Olympics.
Right. So we'll cover everything from data centers to steroid Olympics at the summer conference, but we'll put some links in the show notes so that everybody has all the information. Michael, any final thoughts from you before we close out?
No, I like the idea of let's kind of pick through the things that seem like they affect Maryland policy and politics. I'm fine talking about the random stuff too, but I like the idea of running through like this. Dom, thanks for joining. I think that rounds out our conversation better than the 2 tax nerds going for 45 minutes on property taxes. Reining us in is a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And like Dom said, make sure you do check out the briefing room if you want to learn more, especially about data centers, all the energy stuff that is on our blog, and we're going to keep pushing those out. So we'll leave it there for today. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe. That way, all of these episodes get sent directly to the device of your choice. Make sure you also follow along on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and then, of course, you need to be reading the Conduit Street blog. But for Michael Sanderson, Dom Butchko, and our esteemed producer, Chantal Malcolm Lim, this is Kevin Kinnally signing off, and we will talk to you soon.